And here we are.
Hello.
Hello. How's everybody doing?
Fine and dandy, young sir. How's you?
Doing okay, yeah.
Very
Doing
good.
all right, yeah. That's good to hear. Welcome to everybody. We're back for the usual kind of shenanigans. Hope everybody's well. So you've seen the title. You know what this is about. So without much further ado, so 16th of July, 1969, 1:30 in the afternoon UTC time at Kennedy Space Center. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins launched into space in a Saturn V rocket to land a man on the moon. This mission was Apollo 11, as we all know, and the Saturn V that they travelled on are the stages of the moon landing craft that would bear famous names that everybody in the public would come to know only too well over the years. The Command Service Module, Columbia, the Lunar Module, Eagle, and when they landed on the surface, Tranquility Base. They travelled through space for 3 days, and on the 20th of July 1969, the Lunar Module Eagle, which was piloted by Buzz Aldrin and also carried Neil Armstrong, separated from the Command Service Module Columbia, which was crewed by Michael Collins, and headed for the lunar landing site Mare Tranquillitatis. And at about 20 past 20, well, I think it was 2017 UTC, the Lunar Module Eagle touched down upon the moon's surface. And Neil Armstrong spoke the now famous words, "Houston, Tranquility Base here, the Eagle has landed." And the rest became history. The United States had effectively ended the space race and man had landed on the moon. Alrighty. That's what we're going to discuss tonight. So, before we start, this is going to be a juicy one, isn't it, Nodge?
I would have said so, yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to this one. I think, Dave, you probably know my position on this, and as Steve certainly does, because we've been arguing about it for the last 40 years. So.
And Steve, I'm sure you've got lots of things that people will find interesting lined up and ready to go.
Yeah, I've brought some really nice recipes and also some interesting photographs of entertainers playing the ukulele.
It's always good.
You're not sort of going back on your position there, mate. Good.
No, not at all.
Excellent.
That's what we like to see. Okay, Steve, then, shall we? Well, we may as well carry on and continue as we mean to go on.
Okay, so let's just go back a bit. The USA was getting their ass handed to them in a basket by the Soviet Union in the quest for superiority in space. And in 1961, President Kennedy set a goal to land a man on the moon and safely returning by the end of the decade. The Apollo program ran from 1961 to 72 at a cost of $25.4 billion, which is the equivalent of $156.2 billion today, and was the peak of mankind's ingenuity and technology. Or was it? Much has come to light, to the very least, and it's cast some doubts if the lunar landings actually did take place. Tonight, we're going to look at some of the evidence for both sides of these claims. As usual, we're going to bring you both sides of the evidence and let you make your own minds up.
That sounds good to me.
Well, that's it. I'm going home now.
That's it. That's the end of it. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you in a few weeks.
It was quite weird, actually, because I do remember as a kid, I mean, I was absolutely nuts when it comes to the space thing. Obviously, being a big science fiction fan, being a big comics fan and that. Man landing on the moon. My dad used to work for DC Thompson's and used to go around the country delivering comics, but he'd go to places like W.H. Fish, John Menzies, etc. And he'd bring home every newspaper of the day. And in there, obviously, because of what was going on, front page, whatever, excuse me, big pictures, big stories about what was going on. And I had, I'm not kidding you, the most massive collection of scrapbooks with all this stuff in it. And on the day when they landed, I think it was about 9 o'clock our time, I think it was, something daft like that. And I remember staying awake as long as I could, and I fell asleep, and my mum woke me up in the middle of the night and said, "You don't want to miss this." And I ended up sort of going downstairs and watching, well, what became history. And for me, it was like the icing on the cake for everything that had followed from years, from, you know, like Apollo 1 onwards. And then, obviously, you think it's the bee's knees, and you follow the space program with a little bit of interest beyond that, all the rest of the missions, then eventually the space shuttle missions and ISS. But then you start reading other things, and although I'm not 100% certain that it didn't happen, I'm certainly very doubtful on some of the things that we've been told. That's my little background into the story anyway, because there is, like I said before, the Americans did have their asses handed to them in an handbasket because the Russians did so many firsts. I mean, I think they had something like 500% more hours in space that the Americans had. And then they sort of said, you know what, we're going to go to the moon. I mean, that would be like, either of us saying we've just swam a breath in the swimming bath, but then we're going to do the channel. So that's my little bit anyway for now.
Nubs, thanks for joining us. Thanks, Kerry. Thanks, Dan, and also Steve. Stranger Times. Nice to see you there, and anybody else who might be in the side chat there. Thank you. Mine obviously is born a couple of years after the moon landing. However, the Apollo program was still in full flow as I was, a youngster. So pretty much any involvement in paying any attention in that involvement in any kind of space exploration was down to the shuttle era for me. Remember the launch of Columbia and so on and so forth. But of course, you start to look into things and just the sheer the scale of the achievement of landing on the moon made me interested in looking into space exploration and even astronomy more. And of course, I really, really thought it was a fantastic achievement by mankind to put a man on the moon. And that's sort of where it come from for me, just like being around the space shuttle starting off and that being a big thing in the news. So there wasn't really a massive any kind of level of doubt of what was being achieved or what had been done beforehand for me. So that's sort of where I was at with it anyway. And what about you, Nodge?
I was born in 1963, and to me, I like Steve. I remember being up in the middle of the night watching those grainy black and white images, and for me, the moon landings are the last time mankind did anything remotely interesting or that stretched us, that changed the world. And I think it was a moment when so many scientific and engineering and political forces came together behind 400,000 people to put these amazing missions out there. 239,000 miles mean distance, which is incredible. I've been to the Kennedy Space Center. I've seen the Saturn V rocket that they've got there. I mean, it's just, the thing is just an enormous testament to what can be done in engineering terms. So for me, I think it was a defining moment in the history of recent human activity and exploration. I don't think we've done anything nearly as interesting since. Space shuttle is very interesting, but if you look at a model of the Earth-Moon system, we just hang around in low orbit, whereas these guys, even Jim Lovell's mission that went wrong, they went around the backside of the moon, 240,000 miles, and came back. And I think all the missions were just a phenomenal achievement by everybody concerned, with very little computing power at the time. Remarkable.
Can I just say that you did mention there about low Earth orbit, and we'll probably cut into that a bit later on, but that is a very interesting point, because all the missions before Apollo and all the missions after Apollo have all been in low Earth orbit, and there is a good reason for that. So we'll come to that later on.
There is, but I think we'll differ on the reasons. But absolutely, yeah. I think for me, Dave, these missions kind of shaped a bit of my life. I've always had an interest in science, as Steve knows, and I think they really enthused me at an early age. And I think for many people of our age, they've kind of shaped a bit of who we are. So I held them in great reverence. I've no doubt things went wrong, and I've no doubt that things were changed to try and stage manage it. PR was very, very it was at a very sort of basic level then. So I think it would have been harder to fake these things than it would have been to actually do them, frankly. The technology to hope some of these landings would have been almost impossible, I would argue. But there we go.
Yeah, and I think it's not lost on any of us here on the panel or anybody who might be in chat the importance of propaganda during the era at which the Apollo moon landings and Gemini flights and everything really surrounding the space race was falling during the Cold War. And that isn't lost on any of us too. Obviously, the need for the automatic upmanship or one-upmanship from the west to the east regarding both space travel as well as nuclear weapon development. But I'm pretty sure we'll touch on that anyway. So Steve, where you've got some videos you want to shoot? Steve is pretty much the guy who puts like bits and bats together for all you guys to look at, and then me and Nodge sort of sit back and rip it to bits with some kind of moral high ground, which is a bit farcical in many ways. But Steve does the work of putting these things together, and it allows myself and Nodge to be able to comment on it. Is the truth of what goes on. So
Steve does all the work, definitely.
I mean, where do you want to come from? Do you want to come from the beginning with, like, you know, Kennedy's speech to everybody and the conversations between Kennedy and Webb from NASA, actually seeing if anything was actually, you know, plausible to do? It's entirely up to you.
Yeah, I think it's massive. Sorry, Nodge, it's massively relevant, isn't it? The Kennedy speech. So personally, I think that would be a good one to start with. Yeah.
Okay, so if you just bear with me, because like I explained before, I do have to have a little bit of messing around with this. So just bear with me. I'll get this sorted out. So I'm going to play first of all for you Kennedy's speech, which is the one which he put forward to the Senate, basically to say, you know what,
funds which are needed to meet the following national goals. First, I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
So that was Kennedy's original speech. He'd actually had a conversation with Lyndon B. Johnson, basically because senators had come to him saying, you know what, we're getting our ass kicked all over the place. When are we actually going to be in front and, you know, actually be able to turn around to the American public, because we're getting all sorts of grief off them saying, why are the Russians so ahead of us? So he got hold of Lyndon B. Johnson and said, look, I need to know, is there anything that we can do?
Of course, you're referring to the space race here, yeah?
Yeah, to the space race, yes, sorry, because obviously you had the first man in space, the first satellite in space, the first animal in space, the first woman in space. Literally, all the first were down to the Russians. So he wanted to know if it could be done. So Lyndon B. Johnson got in touch with, is it Henry Webb, I think he was called, at NASA. And I've got a clip of the conversation between them, if you'd like to hear that, of what he wanted to find out. Would you like to hear that?
Henry Webb, is that not Cliff Richard's real name?
It could be Cliff Richard, but I think what he's done, he's had a bit of a face makeover in the meantime, as you'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it, Steve.
Oh.
Keep the Apollo program within schedule.
Well, I mean, these people have got to fly and put men up there, and it's awfully hard to go to North America and say we. If I get reelected, we're not going to go to the moon in our period, are we? No, you're not going. You'll fly by us, probably. You think the man landing on the moon is a good idea? Yes, I think it is. Because they can do the same with instruments much cheaper. No, sir, you can't do the same. The lunar landing gave us the impetus to build big boosters and to tailor them specifically for the purpose. Therefore, they're going to succeed. Otherwise, they would not have succeeded or been efficient. But this looks like a hell of a lot of dough to go to the moon when you can learn most of what you want scientifically through instruments. And putting a man on the moon really is a stunt, and it isn't worth that many billions.
Sorry about that with the first one. That was actually should be played later on, because that reminds me of something that Nodge said a while back about procurement, that these guys were up there actually on something that people had bid to get the lowest possible price, but we'll go back to that shortly.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so obviously, like, you know, JFK, well known for, or rather, allegedly, are in the public eye well known for wanting to push to land man on the moon because of the clip that he played first off the speech that he gave.
Yeah, but even so, in that he was trying to find out. Excuse me, when he talked to Webb at NASA, even then he's trying to find out a way of cutting back on money, because he did have a lot of tremendous amount of money given to him in regards to what had happened, with the Bay of Pigs, and they'd also put a lot of money into the space program as it was, and he then trying to do this. Obviously, you need a hell of a lot more, which he did. Eventually, he did actually try and approach the Russians to say, let's have a joint going forward into space where we go to the moon, and the Russians sort of went, nah, you're okay, forget that, because they honestly didn't believe that it could be done for the logistic side of it, for the scientific side of it, because of the radiation, or stuff like that. And they basically turned around and said, if we ain't sent a monkey there, we ain't doing it.
Okay, so he had reservations despite his speech.
Yeah,
the public image of that speech that he gave regarding landing man on the moon and everything didn't necessarily reflect what he actually thought himself.
No, he honestly thought that it could be done within reason, but it would take a hell of a lot more. And when he'd spoken to this guy, this Webb character, it was only because he had a lot of influence with a lot of people. Senator Kerr, I think it was, from Oklahoma. He went round and actually helped NASA get a hell of a lot of money for this. And his exact words were that if Henry Webb says that we can actually go to the moon, then take it to the bank, basically. And that was what Kennedy was actually banking on, the fact that this guy said he could do it. So he put all his eggs in one basket after speaking to this guy, because this bloke literally, he turned around and he said, yes, it can. In my experience, in my knowledge, in everything that I know, and, NASA itself, we can do this.
Well, in my experience, just because somebody believes something couldn't happen or something shouldn't happen doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Otherwise, how would you explain the existence of somebody like Barry Manilow? So there you go.
Hey, not Barry Manilow.
Right. Okay. So let's line up number 2, or rather the second bunch of shenanigans.
Right. So where are we looking at this point? Where do you want to go with this one? Right.
Well, obviously the thing is let's have a look at what allegedly I've shown some pictures before of the Saturn V rocket, which was obviously delivering the different stages of the rocket, and obviously the command service module, the lunar module, and then what would ultimately just become the command module when it came to Earth re-entry.
Yeah.
And there's different stages that have been called into question of the flight to the moon, landing on the moon, and coming back. There's elements of it that people don't believe could happen for various different reasons. Whether it's the outfit, if you like, the space suits, the footwear, the footprints being called into question, the flag being called into question, the lack of stars in the background being called into question, the shadows upon the moon's surface being called into question, being able to travel through the Van Allen belt as being also called into question, the amount of radiation they were exposed to during the transition through the Van Allen belt also being called into question, the computing power of the command module, the overall chances of being able to land on the moon also being called into question. There's a lot of things that people that don't think that the lunar landing, that the moon landing took place would like to call into question, isn't there?
So can just backtrack on this? In regards of the week that I've had, there is absolutely no way that I could cover everything there, what you spoke with video. We can certainly discuss anything on that. If there's anything that we discuss and they can say, well, actually, there's a piece of video here that I can use, that is fine. But unfortunately, I'm not the repository of everything that I can put up on screen. Slap my wrist, tell me.
Right. Yes, go, Nodge.
I'm going to say, Dave, on with regard to some of the stuff about radiation and Van Allen, and particularly some of the things about the photography, I'd like to come back to that later, if I may.
Yeah. Absolutely no problem at all. Okay, so I've shown some pictures before of the Saturn V. We know the development of the Saturn V and the development of rocket technology is obviously left over from the Second World War. People like Werner von Braun and various other scientists that maybe the public don't know as much about, but obviously they're an integral part of what ended up becoming the space race. The Germans have got a lot to answer for, some people might say, regarding the delivery for warheads above ICBMs, as well as rockets going to space, whether it's the Soviets or the Americans, because of technology that they were pretty much instrumental in developing during the war.
Do you want me to dive into that then?
Yeah, let's give it a go.
Okay, well, like I said before, the Americans had literally been left behind by everything that was going on. And, to be honest, if you look at what America had done compared to the Russians, you would not at that time think that the Americans would have a cat in hell's chance of getting, men properly in orbit. I mean, you think of it, they just had a guy who'd been up for 15 minutes and come down, not had a complete orbit when Kennedy had said, we're going to land a man on the moon. So you can understand why people would say, you know what, you might be talking a little bit of that bull type stuff here. But they came to a point where Russia, unfortunately, everything went wrong for them. Sergei Korolev died after just a routine operation, and there was nobody in place who could take over, such to a point that I think it was 4 missions of, was it the N1 or M1 rocket that went up, literally all got destroyed. They didn't launch properly. They just blew up on there.
Sergei Korolev being the guy leading the Russian space race.
He put Sputnik up, he put Gagarin up there, and literally he was in charge of everything. And once he died, that was the end of it. And then you find out in the United States, of course, their big character, that's Werner von Braun. Now, von Braun was the brightest student of the three fathers of rocketry. One of them being, Hermann Oberth. They worked together when von Braun was 19 in a 1929 Fritz Lang movie called The Woman in the Moon, which we'll come to later because that actually does play a big part in the Apollo story. A decade and a half later, Oberth and von Braun would be scooped up through Operation Paperclip and would be brought to America to work on, amongst other things, the Apollo program. We could probably do a full show about how the United States redacted the Nazi atrocities performed by some of these brought over via paperclip, but I just want to get this point across. As it's often said, von Braun, amongst others, was only a Nazi because he had little choice in the matter. Excuse me. Actually, he was quite comfortable about being a Nazi until the last couple of years of the war, so much so in 1940 he joined the SS. He met Hitler at least 5 times and began to feel more alienated from the regime because Hitler wanted to mass produce the V2 without refining the technicalities of the systems. Nothing about the Reich's brutality to people. He may not have liked using slave labour in producing the V2s, but he certainly witnessed atrocities and never complained. In fact, there was at least 2 occasions where he could have been charged with war crimes if he had been judged by the same Nuremberg standards that were used against Albert Speer. Von Braun was lucky in so much that he was arrested in 1944 by the Gestapo as he'd been heard talking pessimistically. He was released thanks to prominent Nazis Speer and Dornberger, and 9 months later received a Knight's Cross from Speer at a weird ceremony inside North Rhine Castle. The medal was handed over during the launch of V2s against Antwerp, and the rocket engines lit up the room. And he also had a selective memory of things he was involved in, and once in the United States, the rest, as they say, is history. Interestingly enough, the Apollo series Saturn V rockets were nothing to how von Braun envisioned a launch to the moon. In the 1953 book, Conquest of the Moon, he said, "It is commonly believed that man will fly directly from the Earth to the moon. But to do this, we would require a vehicle of such gigantic proportions that it would prove an economic impossibility. It would have to develop sufficient speed to penetrate the atmosphere and overcome the Earth's gravity, and, having travelled all the way to the moon, it must still have enough fuel to land safely and make the return trip to the Earth. Furthermore, in order to give the expedition a margin of safety, we would not use 1 ship alone, but a minimum of 3. Each rocket would be taller than the New York's Empire State Building, which is almost 1/4 mile high, and weigh about 10 times the tonnage of the Queen Mary, or some 800,000 tons. Von Braun, while he was undeniably an engineering genius, This one-time cog in the Wehrmacht died a largely unquestioned American hero, but perhaps his greatest skill was salesmanship. To enable himself to survive in Nazi Germany, he sold Hitler a dream of victory through superior technology. After Operation Paperclip and reaching American soil, he sold the US Army a vision of intercontinental nuclear dominance. But just watch the Walt Disney space documentaries with appearances from Von Braun for his biggest sale of all. To Americans, he sold the dream of men in space and flags on the moon, and by and large, the nation bought it, no questions asked. Maybe that's why the conspiracies are with us.
Okay, Werner von Braun then. So a big part of it, massive part of it. I guess just showing some more elements. So that you said something there that it would take more than one vehicle, or a vehicle in 3 stages or separate stages.
That's what he believed, yeah.
That's what he believed to get there, and that ended up pretty much being so, didn't it? Really?
Yeah.
We ended up with a command service module, like I said, and the lunar landing module.
But he expected each of these to be the same size as the Empire State Building initially.
Yeah, so he was talking about a massive big rocket to get to the moon and back.
It was big.
Yeah, it does sound like it would be, to be fair. Okay, so that's Werner, and various parts of the Mercury, Gemini, and then late 1960s with the Apollo. Of course, you've got the Apollo mission. Apollo 1 was the infamous fire with Grissom, White, and Chaffee, and the subsequent Apollo missions leading up onto Apollo 11 were, if you would use reconnaissance almost in a way, testing missions to see if it was valid or rather doable to map out and look at landing places, would you say, to take photographs of the moon's surface. I mean, what was the first? Go on.
Yeah, reconnaissance missions almost, weren't they? Yeah.
They set up 2 orbiter missions to map out landing places, and the information that was actually sent back to Earth from these missions. If you look at the data which was used and the photographs that were used to build a huge globe that could be photographed, if you actually look at the simulation between the what they used for the simulation for the landing and the actual landings themselves, well, to be honest, people say like it would be a massive step from NASA to do what they were doing to create a simulation. If you actually see, they've actually got the technology there, they had everything else there. All it would have meant was, oh, well, tell you what, we don't have to go to the moon. This is how we'll do it.
You mean this isn't a pushover of a mission anyway? Everybody's aware of that. I mean, they're traveling 250,000 miles for over 3 days.
Yeah, and there's some information that's come to light that in some of the parts where they said they were in such and such a place, they actually weren't. They actually placed a transparency over the window of the Earth seen from a given point and said, this is where we are. But if you actually look at the detail of it, when they turn this off, you can see they're actually in lower Earth orbit because you can see the bluey glow from the Earth through a different window.
Yeah, you're getting light ingress from another source, proving that they can't be at the place where they're claiming to be.
And if you actually look at the footage, I mean, unfortunately, like I say, because I haven't had time this week to do it all, but there is documentaries out there. If people want to know, if they message me or whatever, I'll send them out where they can go to it. It's actually got the official NASA nomenclature on it to say what time it was sent, where it was. And there's even a part in it where someone's actually saying to them, speak, so that they know when to speak and what they need to say at that point as well.
Okay, so let's, before we start going on to the different elements of what might be wrong about it, let's have a look at the command module. That's the command module with that would actually be the command service module. Upon recovery.
Yep.
You know what? I had that many years ago when the Apollo 11 mission was all over with. My mum got in touch with I think it was the Daily Mirror, because they'd put like a a colour thing together inside of the Daily Mirror with all pictures of what had gone on. And she said, is there any chance that we could have a copy of the pictures? And I got this absolutely huge, like, bloody cardboard roll, and inside it, that was one of the pictures that I had.
Again, there's the command module, as would be have been recovered after Earth re-entry.
When I was at the Kennedy Space Center, I stuck my head in the replica they've got in there, and it's tiny. I mean, there's only just room for 3 blokes. I mean, if you're claustrophobic, forget it.
You can sort of see by looking at that picture that there isn't really room to start breakdancing or doing a waltz or anything like that.
Which makes it all the more poignant when what happened to the guys in Apollo 1 in such a claustrophobic space. Yep. And it certainly looks like something happened there, which shouldn't have.
There's the hatch.
Here's the door. Windows 1, 2, 3, 4.
Again.
Now, see that. Now, let me just point something out here, and you'll hate me for it. But look at the 3 satellite dishes at the back. There's actually a notch there, what shouldn't be there, because it's actually a composite picture.
Yeah, here.
Yeah.
Right.
Can you see where my mouse is wiggling on about here?
Wiggle your mouse as much as you want, Dave.
The control panel inside the command module.
Looks like an overgrown flux capacitor.
AKA Columbia. There's the control panel inside Columbia. There you go, spacecraft 107, alias Apollo 11, alias Columbia, the best ship to come down the line. God bless her, Michael Collins.
Yeah.
And there is Michael Collins in the foreground there.
On your marks, get set.
And another view of the control panel inside Columbia. And another one of Columbia.
Hi, Neil.
And our mate Neil.
Very famous shot.
Yeah, very famous shot there of Neil Armstrong. And another shot of Columbia after Earth re-entry. Looking a little bit worse for wear. Sorry, Nodge.
Looking charred, yep.
Yeah. Looking suitably burnt.
Yep.
As it were. Okay, so there's the Columbia, which we were doing the doody chatting about before we started to go into the all the different elements of the possible conspiracy theories. So look, then you got the lunar module. We'll show a couple of pictures of the lunar module. I've got that. That's wait a minute. Okay, so let's have a look at this lunar module. Again, given what they were achieving to what they were using to do it is actually like absolutely an amazing feat.
Absolutely. I mean, they were brave. You know, I just think the courage it would have taken to risk your life on a bomb, especially with very little fuel at the other end.
And this is what I was saying before about speaking about what you once told me about the astronauts having to look back at what they were actually on in terms of procurement, that everything would have gone to the lowest bidder.
You look at that, that's after it's separated from the command service module. That's the lunar module, aka Eagle.
That was John Glenn, by the way, Steve.
Yeah. So
they asked John Glenn once said, I guess the question most people often ask is, when you're sitting down at the capsule listening to the countdown, how exactly do you feel? And he said, well, the answer to that one was easy. I felt exactly how you would feel if you were getting ready to launch and you knew that you were sitting on top of 2 million parts, all built by the lowest bidder, you know? So
when you finish with these, Dave, can I go to some of the LEM pictures that I've got of mine?
Yeah, and that actually is no longer Eagle and technically Tranquility Base.
Yes, it's the big changeover, isn't it?
It becomes the changeover when it lands on the lunar surface. Yeah,
Yeah.
it goes from Eagle to Tranquility Base. So there's Tranquility Base, Mare Tranquilitatis.
I said the actress to the bishop. Right, let me just find my folder again. Just bear with me one sec, mate. Right, LEM. Right. I'm just going to come over to the screen. Just bear with me. Okay, so come on, where are you? There we go. That's the LEM. Now, it's a feat of engineering until we start zooming in on it. We've got like bits of cardboard, and as you'll see shortly, bits of sellotape and tin foil. So let me just get the other pictures up for you. Like I said, that's the LEM. I wanted to put that one on before because, again, we'll discuss this later. But as you can see, underneath there's no blast crater. But we'll discuss that because I've got a little piece of video footage for you as well for the blast crater. Now, some close-ups now of the LEM. As you can see, there we go. How's that? That's your LEM, and it's held together in bits with sellotape. You've got a $2.3 billion unit at the time, actually held together with bits of sellotape.
I thought parts of the external structure, Steve, were basically what you might call embroidered with gold foil, wasn't it?
There's gold foil on it, which was supposed to be able to sort of like bounce back some of the radiation. The actual scientific analysis for it to say, oh, we've got sellotape on it because that's a way of we don't have to have rivets on it to keep the weight down. And what it does is it keeps everything in place, which is a great idea in itself, apart from the fact of, let me just find it, if you're keeping down the rivets, why do you put them on it anyway? So there's no point in saying that we're keeping rivets down by putting sellotape on it if you've already got rivets on it. So that's one set of rivets there. If we go back, these are so-called panels that reflect the heat and radiation back, which look like badly pieces of cardboard which are stuck, and these massive gaps. Now, this isn't like a mock-up model. This is a close-up of, I think it's Apollo 15. We've got absolutely huge gaps here, which, if this is to so-called bounce back heat and radiation, it's a pretty, well, it's a pretty mildly piss poor way of looking at it, because heat is going to get through, radiation is going to get through. So I mean, it's a bit pointless that. Let me have a look what else we got here for you. So another close-up of the LEM gives you yet even more, as you can see there, more sellotape. There's a close-up, even more sellotape. And another close-up there of sellotape and the massive amount of gaps in between. Let's have a look here. More sellotape. Even more sellotape.
So before anybody starts to get too wrapped up in that look at the state of that, look how bad that is, this, that, and the other, what evidence is there to suggest that compromises the structural integrity of what's underneath what we're seeing?
Because
in any way,
work. If you actually speak to any scientist, they'll turn around and say, I don't even understand how that works, because Scotch tape, or what purports to be Scotch tape, in the temperatures what would up there, would either melt at 200 degrees, or if it was even in the shadow side, would be minus 200 degrees and would literally be brittle and break apart.
Okay, and that still doesn't answer my question of what is allegedly under there that is supposed to be protecting, where the failure of that would compromise the structural integrity of the craft.
Because if you actually look at the top part of the ship, that's where the astronauts would be inside there.
So that is what would be that's the lunar module. That's technically Eagle.
Yeah. As you can see,
Eagle returns to the command service module, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The actual Tranquility Base, the platform stays in place. The boosters lift it from the platform, which is still on the moon's surface.
So it's not the bottom piece where the bottom engine is. This is the top part where the astronauts would actually be. I mean, you think of it. I mean, I remember as a kid buying a model of this and thinking it was the most amazing thing. And when you actually look at it, actually, no, it's not. It's something that you could cobble together yourself in the back garden with a few bits of cardboard, tinfoil, sellotape, and a few struts of aluminium.
But as I look at that picture now, I'm seeing the black cardboard, as you say, and the gold tape actually on the landing platform and not on Eagle itself for the most part, as I'm looking at that.
No,
and that doesn't mean that there isn't anything underneath.
No, but if you remember when I showed you the piece earlier on, look, you've got gaps in this. These gaps here, you know, they're not going to stop any heat coming through. They're not going to stop any radiation coming through. It literally is a bad model.
Okay, but that doesn't mean that you're not seeing what's underneath these panels with the gaps in, though.
Well, if you had a look at the
that isn't the entire surface of the craft. There is still, I would imagine, more than that wall that we're seeing there. You're not seeing the astronauts moving about inside that gap, are you? Is the point I'm making? You're not seeing light through that gap.
Right.
There is another. Let me finish, please. There is a wall. There is another structure behind that gap, surely.
Right, I'll take that on board. But if there was another structure there which was going to prevent all that from coming through, why would you need that on the outside?
Well, again, that might be relevant. However, that has landed during the transition, landing upon the moon. Is there any way at all that the buckling or what we're seeing is due to that?
Well, the buckling, whether it's due to anything that's gone on, that doesn't really matter for the simple reason. If it's held together by any form of tape, which if you look at the close-up stuff, it
does matter if you're putting it forward as evidence.
No, it doesn't, for the simple reason. If that is tape and you're at plus 200 degrees, that is literally going to come apart. If it's at minus 200 degrees in the shadow, which it obviously isn't anyway, it would become brittle and fall apart.
If it's tape and if it's cardboard.
No, it is tape. It is tape because, let me just find the notes for that. Just bear with me 1 second. They're basically saying that they used that because it was the simplest answer to keeping clear of the rivets, which would keep down anything to do with the weight, and it would also prevent anything to do with building up the heat on the outside, which is a nonsense statement.
So what they're claiming that the panels and that the tape and that the cardboard that we've seen is there to help prevent buildup of heat within the craft. It's there to reflect heat back. It's there can you let me finish? It's there to prevent it's there to stop heat. Basically, is that what you're saying?
And radiation.
And radiation.
Yeah, which if that's the case, Chernobyl would have been easily sorted out.
Absolutely correct. You could have done it with some scotch tape and a roll of brown paper.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so that's the tranquility base thingy. That's the what else have we got? Yeah, absolutely, Grinch. He's got an habit of talking over the top of me. What else have we got in line? In fact, hang on a sec. So we've shown some of the lunar module. Let's have a look at the spacesuits before we even move to the Van Allen belt. Sorry about this. Okay, so gloves allegedly worn by the Apollo 11 astronauts. Don't know exactly who those are. So beg your pardon. Could be Niels, could be Buzz, or do we call him Edwin? Again, a good view of the suit there, showing the mirrored visor, which itself lent itself towards a lot of criticism because allegedly showing proof of fakery.
Yep.
Is it like if I zoom in on that a little bit there, you know, for that kind of thing, you can see the reflection of people in the visor and so on. That's Neil Armstrong's suit. Again, Neil's. The infamous boots, which we'll cover later. They again are something that massively come under scrutiny. Without the backpack, don't quite look as cool without the backpack though. And again, I think that's Neil Armstrong's. Is being the main one really for the Apollo 11 in the eyes of the public regarding fame, I suppose. Okay, so the spacesuits, capability of them being able to do the job that they claim them to do.
Me?
Yeah, take it if you've got something that you with that one.
There is a documentary that shows some video of the suits where there's actually rips in it. Also, as you've shown before with the gloves, which should be actually pressurized, so they should be like quite a steady look to them, if you understand what I mean. And yet, no, they're not. They look like gardening gloves. And also, you've also got to look at the fact of the PLSS, the life support system. How quick can that sort of convert between, let's say, 200 degrees to minus 200 degrees in a fraction of a second when they go between where it's, absolute light to absolute dark, which is in shadow, because literally as you transfer over into that zone, it does drop to that point. There's quite a few inconsistencies, but,
I do have to say they do look like gardening gloves.
Yeah, but you see where the blue fingers are under there is pressurized. Now, if you look at them, and there is shots on the moon, video footage on the moon of them like using hammers, this, that, and the other, and they do close-ups. And literally, where you see on there where it looks, quite expanded, it literally isn't. It just looks like you've got a set of gardening gloves from Wilkinson's, and that's what they've got on the hands.
Excellent. Okay, so that's the suits, as they say. Now let's have a look at the buoys. Let's have a quick look at the buoys. Now I'm going to put this one up because this has done the rounds and everybody's seen it, or most people have seen it. So let's put this one up. Okay, I'll enlarge it a little bit.
Yeah. Look at that, and then look at the underneath of it. That I know where you're going with this. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the boot, and then let's. Obviously, I know that you know where I'm going with it.
Yeah.
Let's.
Oh.
And there's one of the footprints allegedly made by Neil Armstrong when walking on the moon.
Is weird.
Now, allegedly, they were supposed to be like galoshes that they put over the top so they would have a bit of a grip on it. But what you've also got to think about is if you look at that and you see the perfect, well, you see yourself. I mean, how many times have you gone to a beach and made a sandcastle? And if you made a sandcastle, which has always worked best, a sandcastle made out of dry sand or one that's a little bit wet? Hello?
Yeah. I think
on the surface in terms of the lunar regolith, aren't you?
Yeah. I'm looking at that for the simple reason. Yeah. How do you? I know some people say it's a silicate, so it acts different because of the way the moon works. But you look at that. I mean, even Mythbusters try to sort of say, you know what? This is absolute nonsense because here we are in a vacuum. We've got this regolith stuff made by NASA, who said this is the perfect example of how it works. So they stick it into a vacuum chamber. They use pressure on it and they pull it out. And I'll tell you what, if you look at the difference between that footprint there, what Dave's showing now, and the one that Mythbusters does, which they said actually solves and says, that the myth is absolutely pants. It looks nothing like it, because if you actually sort of just touched the Mythbusters one, it'd fall to bits, whereas that one looks like it'd be there for a long, long time.
Well, there's no atmosphere or anything to act upon it to stop it from looking like that for a long, long time.
Exactly. So why on earth the Mythbusters people turn around and say this is a perfect example of it? And I'm not saying the facts at the moment, because it would take a long, long time for it to go. But if you look at the difference between the actual what you're looking at there and what Mythbusters have done with their so-called experiment, it looks nothing like it at all. They did try to put it across that it looks like it, and in some vague, obscure way, it does. But it's certainly.
Did Mythbusters construct it out of a silicate and leave it in a vacuum?
Yeah, they did it in a vacuum chamber.
Okay.
That is absolutely clear. That it's proper delineated of it, and yet their version of it, it doesn't. It literally look like I said before. Like the perfect example would be if you made a sandcastle out of wet sand and dry sand. If you had one of dry sand, you could literally touch it and it'd fall to bits, whereas a wet one wouldn't. That there looks like it's in place, whereas a Mythbusters one wouldn't.
How long did the Mythbusters one take to fall apart?
Well, that I can't say, because when it comes to something like Mythbusters, it's like, yeah, we did it, and then they move on to something else.
Because that was taken on the day.
Yeah.
So that photograph there was taken on the day.
Yeah.
So not 40 or 50 years later, obviously.
But 50 if it was there, it should be the same.
Yeah, but we don't know if it's the same or not. Nobody's made that claim, have they?
No, because we're not allowed to, because there's a no flyby zone on the areas.
Right. I'm not sure of the credence of that as a debunking element then.
I have no idea what you mean by that.
Well, saying that it should still be that intact and using that as a way of debunking the footprints on the moon doesn't stand.
But Google, a few years back, tried to launch this SpaceX initiative where they said that if a business could launch to the moon, and when they got there, they could launch a rover, and if you could move over 500 yards, go in the areas, then that would be absolutely fine, because then they could go and have a look at where the Apollo mission has landed. All of a sudden, NASA turned around and said, "Oh, hang on a minute, we don't want people doing that, because it's actually going to it's going to actually the areas?
Contaminate.
Contaminate the areas. So we don't want you doing that." So they applied to the American courts and said, "We don't want people to do this. We want a 2-kilometer flyby zone where people aren't allowed to fly over it, land near it, and certainly not go on it." And it was granted, so nobody can go there and prove it, even though there was a company that said that they were going to go there and do it. And in the end, they said, "No, I'll tell you what, after all this hassle, we're just going to bother with the polar regions."
I completely agree with that. There's places of natural beauty and of history that are preserved even on Earth. So I totally understand that. I don't think that in itself lends any credence towards there being any kind of conspiracy. The fact that yes?
Just going to come in on this point that in terms of the geology of the moon dust wasn't or isn't weathered like the Earth, and it's got sharp edges at a microscopic level. So the dust particles stick together and hold the shape in a vacuum. So the astronauts themselves likened it to talcum powder or wet sand. So in geological terms, because of the structure of the silicates on the moon, because there's been no weathering due to no atmosphere and that sort of thing, it will tend to form solid shapes. I'm not getting into an argument about the shoes, but that would be the reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, understood that. Okay, so that's supposed to be a picture of an X-ray to make sure that the structural integrity of the overboots, or the so-called galoshes, was okay and not likely to cause any problems for Neil Armstrong. You can see on the outsides of it there that would lend itself to the type of tread that we actually see on the moon surface, as well as the tread that you can see on the bottom, right through the actual pictures of the boots themselves. They're the overshoes on the right-hand side here. There's the gardening gloves. Now, in this picture here, you can see some a copper or metallic banding that looks like it would be some kind of seal to the edge of the suit there, despite the fact that they look like gardening gloves.
They really
You
do
can
look like gardening gloves. I've never thought about that before. It's true, isn't it? Yeah.
But you can see the steel here that would come into contact with this rim on the collar of the on the cuff of the wrist part of the spacesuit here, which would enable some kind of seal.
Yeah.
More pictures of footprints on the moon via the Apollo 11 landing, and back to that. Okay, so they're the boots inside the actual suit, and then the galoshes or the overboots went over the top of that one. Is pretty much how I'm reading that. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Right now, when it comes to the boots, the thing about the boots is the footprints can still be seen. And the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, which went around the moon in 2009, captured photographs of all the Apollo landing sites. It's shown the Apollo spacecraft where they should be, and you can they even shown that you can see the tracks of where the astronauts walked. So the footprints are still on the moon, and these landing sites, as well as these footprints, have also been verified by other countries that what have launched spacecraft that have orbited the moon, like China, India, and Japan.
Yeah.
And given the relations that we have with the East, I'm not entirely sure why China, India, or, well, at least in the very least, China would want to sort of like back up any kind of story that America might be trying to propagate just on the back of footprints. I've got some of the pictures what show the footprints on the moon somewhere. Let's have a look at some of these. Okay, so there you go. There's the Apollo 11 site over on the left there in the West Crater. You can see the lunar module. And you can see the lunar module in the shadow of the module being cast. Here. So, like, as you can see there, Apollo 14, there's the lunar module on Ceres. The shadow of the lunar module to its right, and the track of the footprints out to the scientific instruments and even beyond. And then, of course, going back multiple tracks and then back to the lunar module. And another one where you can see the tracks of where the astronauts have been walking up to the scientific instruments.
Nothing showing, Dave.
Are you sure?
No, sorry, Dave. I can't see that. No.
Unbelievable. Let's try that again, shall we? Let's try that again. Tell me it's working now. Now? There we go. That should be working now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ah, okay, cool. Okay, so there's Apollo 14. There's the lunar module. You can see the footprints of the astronauts here. Another one, lunar module on the bottom, scientific instruments over here. You can see the footprints, the tracks being taken by the astronauts. And again, more tracks. Left on the surface of the moon. And the video from Apollo 17. And then the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter in 2011 taking photographs of the Apollo 17 site with the footprints or the tracks of the astronauts in exactly the same place, matching up exactly in relation to the lunar module. And again, Apollo 17, a lunar reconnaissance vehicle. The flag and the shadow of the flag, as you can see here, like enlarged here, massively pixelated, but so photographic proof that somebody walked on the moon. Is it or is it not?
Well, seeing I'm the one that's been chosen to hang out to dry, I mean, I could easily turn around and say that any idiot with Photoshop could sort of do anything like that. It's very easy to do. And I know what you're saying before about the Japanese, Chinese not wanting to do anything like that. But there are many inconsistencies within that the photographs that you've shown there. That a group of Italian photographers have turned around to say that no, they wouldn't quite work that way because of the shadows on the ground. They don't seem consistent with the topography of the lunar surface. But again, like I say, I don't know. I'm not there.
Dave, I think one thing that interests me is that there've been a number of sort of people making a study of hoax. I mean, John Longuski has made a study of all the sort of lunar hoax stories, and the one thing he's always said that has made a lot of sense to me is that NASA have just one narrative, and that's the narrative of the missions and the tapes and the photographic evidence, whereas hoaxes come from a lot of different angles, and some of them disagree. Some of them are sort of mutually inconsistent. So I think one of the things that has often been a problem for me is that some of the hoax theories are not sort of entirely consistent with each other. But
yeah, well, that's the thing with it, isn't it? Okay, what do you want to go through now, Steve? What have you got? Have you any videos lined up or anything you want to push out?
Just have a quick look for you. Let me see what I've got in the folder. Just bear with me 1 second. God, Windows 10, I fucking hate it. I really do. Right, let me just come out of this. What an absolute blast craters. I don't know if you're interested in that.
What craters?
Blast craters.
Yeah, let's go with blast craters. Always interested in that. Okay,
so let me just quickly show you how it should have looked when they came down. Just bear with me 1 second. I'm going to throw this up on here now. Okay, so this is roughly. Hang on. So as you can see there should have been a hell of a lot of dust, and a lot of people turn around and say, well, actually, what should have happened is that when they got nearby, they actually turned off the engines. Well, that's really good in itself, apart from the fact that they turned the engines off when they should have turned it, which was as they were coming down. So there would have still been a little bit of what was going on. Now, I've got an animation here, something that I did earlier. I've just got to find the damn thing. Let me have a look. I think this may be it. Well, it's part and parcel of the same thing, I think. Just bear with me. The noise of the lunar lander. Right, I'm going to have to come off and put the noise on it so you can see. Okay, just 1 sec. So let's go to there.
Down a half. 6 forward. 60 seconds. Lights on. Forward. Forward. 40 feet down 2.5. Picking up some dust. Straight shadow. 4 forward. Drift into the right a little. 30 seconds forward. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. We copy you down, Eagle. Listen, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Can I make a point about this?
Yeah, you do before I do. Yeah.
Sorry, Is that the end of the clip, Steve?
Yeah, sorry, just coming out of it now.
I was just going to say that in engineering terms, one of the features of the landing craft was that the DPS, the descent propulsion system, yes, it was capable of 4,500 kilograms of thrust, 10,000 pounds. We know that, but it was actually throttled back to about 10 kPa, which is about 1.5 psi. So in other words, the output was virtually nominal at the time that they actually touched down.
Okay, yeah, I can go for that because as you can see on the actual screen when he said engine cut off, but when they actually do the launch later on to get off the moon, obviously that's not been throttled back and there's still no sound either. But, you know, I only shown that there anyway for the simple reason I couldn't find the clip that I wanted to find. Like I say, it's all over the place at the moment. What I was trying to find was the fact that they had come down and there was dust all over the place, so we could go into the actual the crater side of it, because even if it was a mild amount of thrust which was on there, it should have still shifted some of the dust which was underneath. Let me just see if we can come out of that. Just bear with me 1 second.
Well, it looked to me when you look at that video that you do see some kind of detritus being brought up as it gets close to the ground.
Yeah, the other point to make about that is about the structure of the lunar surface. Lunar regolith is actually very, very compact below the surface dust layer. So in other words, yeah, there's a surface layer of dust, but there's no cratering that would have gone on, because actually underneath that layer of dust, the regolith is very compact, like a normal rock. So in other words, you wouldn't blast any crater out or that sort of thing anyway.
And given that they're not needing the same amount of dust, the same amount of thrust to take off from Tranquility Base to get back up to the command module, they don't need the same amount of thrust anyway to detach from the Tranquility Base platform with the Eagle to get back to the command service module anyway, given the gravity and the conditions that they're in. So they don't need thousands of pounds of thrust to make it back to the command module.
No, they actually did some. No, absolutely. They actually did some experiments later and measurements later that showed that the lander foot pads had pressed under the lunar surface and found that the engine had eroded about 100 to 150 millimeters of regolith from underneath the engine bell during the final descent.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, yeah. So very limited amount of thrust needed to negate any impact of descent and very little needed to take off.
Well, there's an awful lot to take off. Even if you take into 1/6 the amount of gravity that's needed, it still has to escape. And the fact that even when you actually engage these engines, if you don't hear anything at all, surely that's got to be something, because no matter what you launch with, there's got to be some kind of noise there.
Well, there's an explosion. It isn't actually a thrust, is it, when it goes off? It's actually set off by an initial burst, and then there isn't thrust.
Yeah, but even if you come up to the look at...
Go on, Nodge.
Okay.
Sorry, Steve, carry on.
No, it's okay.
I was just going to say, in terms of the actual ascent of the lunar module used slightly different fuel. It used Aerosine 50 as the fuel and dinitrogen tetroxide as the propellant. And they actually ignite on contact with each other. They call it hypergolic
fuels.
Yeah, there's no need for any spark or ignition. And to be honest, as we know, it's a vacuum. So I don't know. It was transparent, the exhaust, more or less.
So little needed to land, and a totally different system used to ascend back to the command module.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Can I just give you a quick demonstration about hypergolic fuels, that it isn't as silent as everybody seems to make out? Just bear with me 1 sec.
But a lot of this seems to be based around not hearing the noise.
Yeah, it's not. Well, you think of it, right? When you look inside the actual command module, they were actually sat on top of the bloody engine as it was. There is actually documentary footage of a guy from NASA showing somebody around it saying, yeah, the astronauts were sat on the engine. So even if you couldn't hear the noise, you would be sat on it where you get a transference via vibration or whatever, which you would get some form of noise through anyway.
But these are using microphones that are mounted inside, which are going to be transducer or condenser microphones close to the lips.
Which will still pick it up, because if you look at some NASA footage later on, they say that just like a drum, you would pick this up through the microphones, and it shows somebody belting a piece of metal into the ground, and you hear thud, thud, thud. So what's the difference between a thud, 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 and then somebody sat on top of an engine and it being sort of pushed through like a drum, as they say, into the microphones?
They're banging a piece of metal into the ground. Where is this? This is on Earth.
No, that's actually on the moon.
All right, so they conducted that experiment on the moon.
Yeah, it was when they were digging out samples and they were thudding away with it, and it actually shown them there. Like I say, all you got to do is look for it. I just I had enough time this week to put everything into this. Otherwise, I could have everything you've said so far. I could have counted it. Unfortunately, I've not been able to because I've not had a chance to do it.
Right. So the automatic level controls or automatic gain controls on the transducer microphones, obviously going off the loudest source nearest to the driven element of the microphone at any one time. So that's going to override any background noise anyway, isn't it? Unless everybody's quiet, the microphones are silent, and then it will pick up something further away. That's how the proximity effect works, isn't it?
There's a piece of footage where I think it's Apollo 15 launches and they play some music in the background, like Hail to the Chief or something like that, and everybody hears it, but you can't hear the engines underneath it. So you tell me.
Because the music is a closer source to the microphone than the engines are.
Right, the engines are practically underneath the backsides of them. They actually say that at some point they are sat on the engines.
Yeah, but they're not going to be like a couple of inches away from the engines, are they?
They are sat on the engines. That if you look at the layout of the LEM, they are sat on the engines.
But they're not going to be sat a couple of inches away from the engines, are they?
No, they sat on it.
So they sat on the engine.
Yeah.
So the fuel that goes to that engine, where's that?
There's a bell housing that goes inside, and if you look at it, they sit on there, and that's where it comes under. There's a hatchway above, which would be the hatchway to get into back into the command module, and the bell housing underneath. They are literally sat on that.
So the cabin that they're in is pressurized.
Yes.
Which means there's air in there, which allows sound waves.
Yeah,
it allows sound waves to travel, which is why you're hearing the music. However, the engines are outside.
Yeah, but they're inside.
Am I back?
Yeah, I can hear you, Dave. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah, I've got you again. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. What went on? Have we?
I don't know.
Have we lost mission control?
We lost mission control. Yeah.
Hello.
Houston, we have a problem.
Hello.
There he is.
Yeah, I'm here.
There we go.
We had a Jim Lovell moment then.
Right. Anything else?
Not from me. That's it.
Okie dokie. So that's the inside of that sorted out. Welcome back. Yeah, thanks, Kerry. Don't know what happened there. Okay, so summing up, what do you think, guys? Was it? Did it happen? Did it not? Nodge?
I do take some of the points about inconsistencies from what Steve's been saying. I think that there are some, but I think there are some in the project. It happened for me. However, I think the point about von Braun particularly is well made. As somebody who's studied the history of the Second World War, there's no doubt that the Americans sent these craft up based on Nazi technology. So, I mean, that is certainly the case.
Mhm.
For a number of reasons, I'm not overly convinced that some of the hoax theories are correct. I mean, 400,000 people work for NASA, so it's an awful lot of people to keep quiet. There's also things like not being able to see the stars on the photographs. Well, as a photographer, I know that they were shooting at a 500th of a second because the lunar surface is as bright as the Earth when the sun's on it. So, for me, on balance, I'm still very much convinced that the missions went ahead and actually happened. I'm perfectly sure that they didn't happen the way that they intended them to happen. So I don't dispute that some of the evidence may not be quite as strong as it was, but for me, it happened.
Steve?
Like I said to you early on before we actually came on air, I think it would take at least 12 hours to go through all this. We've got stuff like thermal contraction that we need to have a look at. We've got the stuff about the contradicting shadows on the moon that we need to look at. How the engineers turning around and saying that it was impossible for any mechanism, including cameras, to work on the moon because 1 minute they're in 200 degrees down to minus 200 degrees. Film shouldn't work on there because photographer said below minus 400 degrees it becomes like glass, so you won't be able to use it anyway. The artificial light, what we'd shown there for hot spots and drop zones, we've got all this to do. There's a footage that I sent to the pair of you yesterday that I've not used tonight, which shows literally 2 astronauts in front of the LEM and then someone being thrown past them. There's an awful lot of inconsistencies that if we had the time, we could actually go through and actually talk about properly instead of, like picking on something. Let's have a look at this and then literally try rummage around quickly to find the stuff. It's just been impossible to try and get everything put together in one place at the time. Somebody, Shy Ghost, has just said when Challenger exploded, was a documentary a few years later saying the people were still alive. Yes, they were when the Challenger exploded. Yeah, they were still alive till they went down into the bottom of the sea, and from there it's all history. There's loads of stuff that we need to cover. But unfortunately, we can't do it in one go.
There's no reason why we shouldn't revisit, though, is there?
It depends which way we're going to revisit it.
Okay, well, like I say, I think they landed on the moon. I think it was done. I think like as Nodge said before, pretending to do it, you may as well just do it. The amount of money you'd have to go into it. There's various other theories as to why it was faked and all that lot. Maybe for another time, maybe not. But as things stand at the minute, I think that they landed on the moon. So thanks everybody for watching. See you later.